Hi, everyone.
Welcome to the Radio English Conversation Program.
This is Masaki Osugi, and here with me are
Valerie Koehn
and Jeff Clark.
今日土曜日はゲストですが、今日のゲストにお迎えしている方は東京コミュニティカウンセリングサービスの委員長をしていらっしゃるベティ・スプリッグスさんです。ベティ・スプリッグスさんはボランティア活動をいろいろ通じて東京近郊に住む外国人を対象に相談を行っています。今日はいろいろ興味深いお話が伺えると思います。
Hi, Betty. Welcome to the studio.
Hi, Valerie. Thank you for having me here.
It's nice to have you here.
Thank you.
I'm going to start right off with a very easy question, I think, and it's probably going to be as educational for me as it is for the listeners. Can you tell us about Brooklyn, New York, where you were born and raised?
Oh, sure. As you said, I was born and raised in Brooklyn, New York. And at that time, Brooklyn was the home of the Brooklyn Dodgers, and anyone who's a real baseball buff knows about the Brooklyn Dodgers. And we used to go to Ebbets Field to watch the games. And I know I'm dating myself, but that was a good experience and a positive one that's always stayed with me.
Are you a baseball fan now?
Not so much. Once the Dodgers left Brooklyn.
Well, why? You still don't root for the Dodgers even though they're in L.A.?
Well, that's West Coast, East Coast. It's a different kind of rivalry. Right. Now, if I root at all, it's for the Yankees.
Oh, really?
Yes, the New York team.
Uh-huh. Are you from a large family?
Or? No, there were just two of us, Valerie, and we went to Catholic school for 12 years.
Uh-huh.
So all my education really was in Brooklyn, those first 12 years, yeah.
Uh-huh.
Still a city girl at heart.
Yeah, but I live in the country now, oddly enough.
We
live in New York, in a suburb of New York called Millwood. Little tiny place. I don't think it's even on a map. Uh-huh. And lots of trees. Uh-huh. The house is on a lake, but we can drive into New York in 30 minutes.
That's important.
Into Midtown Manhattan.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So you have the best of both worlds.
Yes,
uh-huh.
Yes.
So it was by choice, not by necessity.
Moving to the suburb,
yeah.
Yes, it was by choice. Raising children, and my husband's job relocated further up outside of the city, so we did move to the suburbs.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Speaking of children, you mentioned that as a child, you yourself were very interested in people. Mm-hmm. That you developed this interest in human beings at a very early age. Can you remember anything specifically that started this interest?
Yes, I mean my grandmother.
Really?
Yes.
You said that with such love and admiration.
Yes. She was a very special person to me, and I always remember her as being a people kind of person. She was the kind of person that was always introducing you to people. Uh-huh. If you were walking down the street, she would just talk to people.
To strangers on the street?
Yeah, just friendly, yeah. And they used to say, my mother and her brothers used to say she was always feeding somebody.
Feeding?
Feeding somebody. Literally, yeah, that somebody, needed dinner. They looked hungry, or they didn't have a place to go, or they had a sad story, and she would bring them home and feed them,
Oh,
and they would join. They would join everybody for dinner. Yeah, so I remember that very well. Mm-hmm. And that was, I think, the beginning. And in addition to that, I am the product of an interracial marriage, and my parents. So therefore, I think we met many, many people between going to Catholic school and going to summer camp, YWCA camps. Mm-hmm. We met people from all over. Uh-huh. And so I think that very early on, I just met lots of people and always talked to people and had an affinity for that.
Uh-huh. You think that the fact that you're a product of an interracial marriage has something to do with the fact that you met different kinds of people?
Meet more people.
Yeah, why is that, do you think?
Well,
social circles?
It's because you're leading a dual life, in a sense.
Uh-huh.
Mm-hmm. Because you're meeting, maybe you're just rounded.
Uh-huh.
Nothing is left to chance.
Mm-hmm.
Everything is there for you.
Very full
life. Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
And very full experiences.
Uh-huh. Well, this led to further interest, obviously further study in human studies or sociology, I guess specifically, is what you majored in college. Is that right?
Yes, I did. And if you want to hear something really silly, I started at college as majoring in recreation, which was probably about...
What is a recreation major?
I know. Well, you learn how to teach people to play games, if you can believe that.
Oh, yeah. I don't think we have anything like that here in Japan.
Yeah, I don't think I've ever heard of anything like it.
We don't even have something like that in Los Angeles.
Oh, I know Los Angeles must have. There's big money in that. Really, teaching archery or golf, all of these things, soccer. But being the city girl that I was, and I went to school, my first experience with college was upstate New York. And the first day they said to dribble the ball, and I only knew from basketball, but it was soccer. So everybody was pushing the ball around with their feet, and I was using my hand.
It's called dribble,
Soccer.
even with your feet?
No, I use dribble because I don't know what... I wasn't... You see, I flunked out of recreation.
Oh, I see.
And now I guess I don't have to tell you why.
No, I guess... I see, I wouldn't have done very well either.
Okay. Well, being in the product of Catholic school, we weren't very athletic anyway.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, that's true.
Because we had to be
Actually, I teach at a Catholic school.
Ah, so you know. And we're supposed to be very ladylike. And
Right.
Yes,
Exactly.
and ladies do not participate in sports.
Yes. That was the rule.
So choosing recreation was maybe a rebellion against that, huh?
It could be. Yeah, I think it was also probably a good way to get out of New York City to see something else of New York State, since I went upstate New York. Yeah. But it wasn't a bad experience, but at that time it was traumatic.
ブルックリンで、生まれ育ったスプリッグスさんはその後ですね、おばあさんの影響を一番大きく受けたというふうにおっしゃってましたね。それはその方が大変この人間愛にあふれた方で、困っている人がいればすぐに家に呼んでご馳走するような方だったからということですね。それが後にソシオロジー、社会学を勉強して、その中で特に人間関係を勉強するきっかけになったというふうにおっしゃっています。そしてご自分のご両親が違う民族の出身同士であったと、その子供だということがまたこのいろいろな人たちと出会うきっかけを作ってくれた。そしてリクレーションの話が出ましたが、これはリクレーションというメジャー、そういうこののはちょっと日本の大学にはないようです。ジェフとバレリーの話でもあまり聞いたことがないそうですが、まあいろいろなスポーツ、その他のこのレクレーションの指導をするような、そういう人を育てる学科ではないかと、またそういう勉強ではないかというふうに思います。でもどうもあまりですね、ベティさんは得意でなかったようで、リクレーションは早いところ諦めたようですね。
So you flunked out of recreation and moved into a more serious field, but perhaps more fun and obviously more successful, sociology and human relations.
And human relations, specifically, the bulk of my studies really have been in the area of labor. Labor studies, which includes labor relations. It includes really studying why people select certain occupations, why groups of people select certain occupations, the history of labor, and all of that. There are a lot of things related to that. And I've really enjoyed the field.
What inspired you to choose labor specifically?
I really don't know, Valerie. I don't know if it was just circumstances that I found myself that as I was getting jobs and being hired to do different kinds of things, it seemed as if, well, now that you've made me think about it, I guess when I do think about it, there is an answer, and I hadn't realized it before. It's that the things that I was doing always seemed to help to lead people to the labor market. And I began to sense that that the core to people is their employment. The core to their life really is their employment. And without that, there really isn't anything else. Because everything is just is extraneous to that, to the issue of how will I eat,
That's right.
And I found that everything I did revolved around that. When people would talk about problems, once that particular problem was resolved, then other things will fall into place.
You mean even personal relations and marital problems, that kind of thing?
Yes, because the stress of not having a job or having a job that you hate or knowing of a job that you can't get to, those kinds of things create stress in the home.
I believe that.
So you really, and I found that people get so paralyzed by fear of not having jobs and food and feeding children and so forth, that they can't think straight about anything else.
You must have run into this a lot as what was it called? An employment interviewer? You
That's
worked
correct.
for the New York State Department of Labor.
Department of Labor, yes, Valerie. Yes, I did run into a lot, and it's just amazing the kinds of issues that are resolved, Jeff. I mean, I know it sounds confusing, maybe, but
Not
it
confusing,
really,
but rather surprising. I
surprising.
mean, for example, would you say like this high divorce rate that is in the United States now, would you say it is because people are so often in jobs that they really shouldn't be in? Or
they're unemployed.
well, unemployed, besides the unemployment
Yeah,
problem.
besides the unemployed, jobs that they don't like, or a job that really doesn't pay enough to feed the family. That's an enormous kind of stress. So we have more working mothers, and though people say mothers shouldn't work, I realize that, and ideally, I guess, perhaps she shouldn't, but the reality is, if there's no money, and one partner is doing everything they can do, the other partner is obligated to help. And it does relieve other problems.
It's a kind of vicious circle, isn't it?
Yes, it is. Yes, I hadn't thought of it like that, but it really is. And I've seen this from single parents as well as couples.
You mentioned earlier when we were chatting that you helped place a lot of Vietnam vets when you were an employee interviewer.
Employment
interviewer.
Yes. Yes. In fact, about the last year and a half before I came to Tokyo, I particularly worked with Vietnam veterans, and that was very difficult and rewarding, and I guess it's a fact of life. The more difficult something is, the more rewarding it is when it's successful. But the deeper the depression when it doesn't work the way you've decided it should work.
There's a problem there, perhaps.
Yes, right, exactly. But Vietnam veterans I found to be a particularly difficult as a group for many reasons. One is that most of the Vietnam veterans were young when they went into the service, when they were drafted, and they were drafted.
Yes.
Many of them were uneducated or barely educated. So they didn't have any labor market skills at the time they went into the service. And though they had to grow up in one sense, they didn't develop a lot of other skills that they normally would have, like social skills, for instance, because their skills are survival skills. And that's really not a marketable product in the civilian market.
Unfortunately.
Spriggs さんはニューヨークのState Department of Labor、というところにお勤めだったわけですが、これ職業安定上に日本ですと当たるんでしょうか。労働省のに近いものかもしれませんね。さて、それで、これまでに実は労働関係を勉強したことで、いろいろ職業安定所でインタビューをする際に一番問題になったことはやはり失業の問題、それから自分の望まない職業についているために家庭に不安が持ち込まれるというそういう悪循環が繰り返されている点ですね。それからベトナム戦争の後に帰国したベトナムの退役軍人の人たちの相談にも乗ったということですね。この場合には非常にやはりこの教育が十分でないというような問題があったようです。
Well, Betty, you've been here about 3 years now, and next week we hope to hear more about your experience in Japan.
Oh, I'm looking forward to it, Valerie. I will enjoy talking about that.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Well, I guess it's about time we say goodbye to our listeners. So this is Masaaki Osugi saying goodbye.
And this is Valerie Koehn
And Jeff Clark.
saying bye-bye.
So long. Welcome to the Radio English Conversation Program.
This is Masaaki Osugi, and here with me are
Valerie Koehn.
And Jeff Clark.
さて、今回のゲストは、先週に引き続き、東京近郊に住む外国人の生活相談に乗っているボランティア団体、東京コミュニティカウンセリングサービスの委員長でいらっしゃる、ベティ・スプリッグさんです。
Betty, it's great to have you back.
Thank you, Jeff. It's a pleasure to be here.
Yeah, the conversation was so stimulating. I have just a million questions to ask, but the first is a rather obvious one. You wrote that you came to Tokyo because your husband was transferred here,
yes,
I believe.
That's correct.
Did you know anything about Japan, or had you been here before?
No, I had never been here, Jeff, but I had traveled with my husband on other business trips to Asia. So I had been to several other countries, including Singapore, Korea, Indonesia. So when he said we were coming to Japan, I said, that's great. I haven't been to that country. So it was really nice for me.
Oh, so you really had a positive attitude coming here, it seems.
I was really excited about it, and I've loved every minute of it.
Great.
And nothing has happened to change my mind.
Well, in our conversation last week, you said that you felt work is the primary thing that puts our life into order.
Yes.
Now, you had worked all those years in the States,
yes.
hadn't you?
Oh, yes.
And suddenly you were put in a situation where you were not making money or working
true.
Regularly.
That's true, Jeff.
How did you handle it?
Well, first of all, let me say that I did say work is what puts people's lives in order, as you said. I didn't say money is what puts people's lives in order. So that we have to have money, obviously, to live. In this situation, my husband is employed, so that money was not the issue. However, I needed to have a core for my own life as my own person, and not just be at loose ends all the time. I somehow could not vision myself shopping for 3 years.
Well, you could always cook, couldn't you?
No.
I wish our listeners could see the look you just gave me.
No, I'm not a very good cook. But I did feel that I'd always need to have a purpose.
Sure.
And I think most people do. They need to have a purpose. And I've always enjoyed work. And for a while there, I felt like I wasn't in control of anything here. I felt like I'm here, and the first part was lovely. Oh, I don't have to get up, I don't have to go to work, and that was really wonderful. But everybody gets 2 weeks vacation, and then at the end of the 2 weeks, you're thinking, okay, now what? I've had my vacation. Now what do I do? And you get up in the house, you've unpacked everything, and everything is in order. You've got to have a purpose, and I have found several activities here that really have given my Tokyo life a very, very valuable dimensions.
Could you talk about some of them?
Surely. One of them is the Tokyo Community Counseling Service, which is volunteer work that I do. And there's an irony in that. I had promised myself that I would never do volunteer work again.
Why is that?
Because I had done so much of it over the years that I just felt, let somebody else do that. From now on, anything I do is going to get paid.
There's the grandmother in you.
See, those are famous last words.
Famous
last words. Yes. So here I am doing volunteer work that I find very rewarding. And if I may, I'd like to tell you a little bit about Tokyo Community Counseling Service. All right. Tokyo Community Counseling Service is a counseling service for the English-speaking community. And it is the only non-profit, non-sectarian agency of its kind here in Tokyo. Many people confuse us with Tokyo English Lifeline, also known as TEL. And that is sponsored by the churches, so that if you're in a crisis situation or you have a problem, you call up and they will answer your immediate problem.
So it is separate from your organization.
Very separate.
Do you do only emotional counseling, emotional crisis counseling? What kinds of counseling do you provide?
Well, it could be marital, it could be teenage, having crisis, school problems, or what have you. There's a lot of stress associated with moving.
Yes.
And that comes to the fore quite frequently. Anxiety could be job related. You know, many people come here for a job they want, and after they're here, they find out that the atmosphere is different. Same company, but the atmosphere may be very different in terms of the day-to-day operation.
Do your staff members, those professionals, only work for the Tokyo Community Counseling Service, or are they also, do they have like private offices or?
Well, right now we rent space, and they do their counseling in space that we rent primarily at the Tokyo Union Church. However, I'm so glad you asked that question, because we are in the process of moving into our own office for the first time.
Wow.
And we hope to be in by June. And we're really excited. It'll be the first time we've had a permanent home.
That's
And it's going to be in Ebisu.
How long has the center been, the counseling service been in operation?
Since 1978.
Almost 10 years
Yes,
then.
that's correct.
さて、だいぶ長く話しましたけれども、スプリッグスさんは、今回日本にやってくる前には、アジアへは来たことがあったが、日本には来たことがないということでした。そして、もう躊躇なく日本を選んだということですけれども、仕事を持つようになったきっかけは、やはり自分の生活に芯を通して、なんか目的意識を持って生きていきたいということから、どうしても仕事を持ちたかったということのようです。そして、この働いていらっしゃる東京コミュニティカウンセリングサービスは、英語を話す外国人に対してだけ相談に乗るという団体なんですけれども、1978年から活動していますから、もうほぼ10年になろうとしているわけですね。そして、ナンプロフィットという言い方でお分かりのように、非営利団体ということですが、プロのカウンセラーの人たちは、給料をもらっているようですね。今回、初めて自分たちのオフィスが持てるということで、大変これから期待できそうです。
You said that the people who receive counseling are all English-speaking persons.
That's correct.
Okay, so on the whole, foreigners.
Yes.
Okay.
That's
Now,
correct.
What problems would a foreigner in Japan have that the same person in his home country, or say in Europe or America, wouldn't have or might not have?
You know, there's that big umbrella called stress, and a lot of things fall under it. And I think that there are a lot of hidden stresses. For instance, people may come because they say it's a marital problem that they may or may not have had at home. And part of it may be the fact that we are illiterate when we come here. And that, for myself, I found that very frustrating. And when I talk to other people, they also mention the fact of feeling so helpless with that. And perhaps because I feel illiterate all day long, when my husband comes home, I'm ready for an argument. So now we suddenly have a marital problem because I have this frustration all day long, and I'm not really aware. It's not conscious that I'm lost all the time. You know, I'm lost in these tunnels, in subways.
And it's not so much the marital problem, but another problem that reflects onto the marriage.
That's right. And if you talk about a specific problem, one of them very well might be the fact that the same network, and Valerie, we talked about this earlier, the network is not here. The support system is not here initially. The people that you have a history with, who know you, who know when you get that look in your eye, Jeff, that means, you've had a bad day, and they'll say to you, what's wrong? You know, what can I do to help you? Well, nobody knows you here to say that.
Yes.
And even if they do, sometimes there are different signals that people give off. And so the messages that you're expecting to hear don't come in the same way that we're used to hearing them, for instance, among our own peers in our own countries.
Yes, yes, that's a very good point. Yes.
Right.
Well, okay, you mentioned that the volunteer work for Tokyo Community Counseling Service is one way that you've given a core to your life. Could you talk about some of the other activities that you've engaged in?
And well, let's say I do Welcome Furoshiki, which is a program.
What is Welcome
Furoshiki? I'm not saying it right, am I? All right, okay. It is under the umbrella of Oak Associates, and it's very similar to what we call Welcome Wagon in the United States. And we come to your home if you were a new to the community, and we might get your name from a moving company or from a colleague of yours who's been here a while. They might call and give us your name, and we would come and bring you a package. It's wrapped in a furoshiki, and in the package you would find maps and samples and coupons and useful things, useful information, and we kind of use that as an entree to ask you, are you having particular problems that we might be able to help you with, or at least to refer you to someone who might be able to give you better assistance and more assistance.
Does this have some connection with the counseling service?
No, it's just me, Jeff. It's just me. If you remember last week, we talked about the fact of liking opportunities to meet people. It's just another way for me to take advantage of enjoying meeting people and forcing myself, incidentally, to go around to places and to get places that I really haven't been and would not know how to get to otherwise. Yeah.
It must be hard, though. I mean, sometimes maybe even those people can't explain how to get to their house, can they?
You're absolutely right, and we get some awkward moments where we're at one place and the person may be at another, or they really don't know how to give you directions. So frequently we'll say, well, could you meet in a hotel if they know a particular hotel, perhaps they've stayed at one, or we'll meet in a train station or a coffee shop.
Yeah.
And one lady, when I finally got to her home, she said, every place I told you to go right, I should have said left, and every place I said left, I should have said right. But it works out. In the long run, it works out.
You also mentioned that you have a couple of interesting Japanese hobbies. You do flower arrangement and sumie.
We never use the word flower arranging.
Oh, what do you use?
Ikebana. I can do flower arranging in the United States. Here I do ikebana.
Did you do these in the United States?
Never.
I mean, did you even have hobbies like them in the United States?
I would buy flowers and stick them in a jar and consider them arranged. But here it's an art form, and it's so satisfying. I am taking my lessons from an instructor who's affiliated with Sugetsu School. And about a month or so ago, the headmaster came. And he presented our certificates that we had earned.
Oh, how nice.
And I felt like it was such an honor to do this. You know, I was really very thrilled by it. And I've enjoyed it. And it's not just the hands, it's the mind and the heart that goes into this. You know.
ストレスの話から始まってですね、その後だんだんに、やはり、言葉の問題というのが日本にやってきた外国人の問題の背後にあるようです。それがやはり、さらにストレスを生んでいくということになるんでしょうか。そういう問題が、個別の問題として、取り上げられていましたが、その後Welcome Wagon という話と Welcome 風呂敷という話が出ました。これは実はアメリカでは Welcome Wagon と呼ばれるんだそうですが、この引っ越してきた新しい人にこの近所ではこういうふうにやってますよということを、またはこういうふうな、この場所はこういうところにあるんですよというようなインフォメーション、それから、引っ越してきた人たちが困らないような、例えば、すぐに使える歯ブラシとか歯磨きとかそんなものを詰めたものを、送るんだそうです。その同じようなことを Welcome 風呂敷という名前で、ベティさんがやってらっしゃるということでした。
It's really been great talking with you these 2 weeks, Betty.
I've enjoyed it, Jeff, and I really thank you. I mean it so much, you know, the way we met, and then this is an outgrowth of that our conversation initially, and I've enjoyed this so much in meeting you, Valerie, and you, Sensei. It's been my pleasure and my honor. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Well, I think it's about time we say goodbye to our listeners. So this is Masaki Osugi saying goodbye.
And this is Valerie Koehn.
And Jeff Clark.
Saying bye-bye.
So long.